Rain pounded against the roof of the lonely cabin as thunder roared across the dark sky. Inside, a small, trembling girl clutched her sister's hand, her eyes wide with fear and glistening with tears. She looked up at the rugged cowboy standing by the doorway, his shadow stretching across the flickering candlelight, and whispered in a voice barely louder than the storm, "Can you take her instead of me?" The cowboy froze, his jaw tight, his hands hovering uncertainly over his coat. Silence hung heavy in the room, broken only by the wind howling through the cracks, each gust echoing the girl's desperation. His eyes softened for a moment, revealing the conflict within, a battle between self-preservation and the sudden surge of protectiveness he had never known he possessed. Every heartbeat felt louder, every second stretching as the audience held its breath, caught between fear, hope, and the promise of something extraordinary about to unfold. The cowboy stood alone by the flickering fire, his rugged face shadowed by the brim of his worn hat, muscles tense from years of solitude and harsh living. Yet his eyes held a softness no one had ever seen. In the corner, the little girl clutched her younger sister tightly, trembling as the wind rattled the cabin walls and the distant sound of approaching danger sent shivers down their spines. She looked at him with wide, fearful eyes, silently begging for someone to protect them from the unknown threat lurking in the night. The cowboy's heart stirred, an unfamiliar warmth breaking through his hardened exterior as he took in their small, fragile forms and realized they were completely defenseless, relying entirely on him. Every creak of the floor, every gust of wind made the room feel smaller, the danger closer, and the audience could feel the tension, fear, and the unspoken bond beginning to form between these unlikely companions. The little girl's grip on her sister tightened as the wind screamed through the cracks in the cabin walls, rattling the old wooden shutters, and her voice broke again, trembling but urgent. "Please, please don't let them take her. Take me instead." The cowboy's jaw clenched, and his eyes flickered toward the shadowed corners where the night pressed in with invisible hands, each creak of the floor beneath them echoing like a warning. His mind raced, a storm inside as fierce as the one outside, torn between the instinct to protect himself and the sudden, overwhelming desire to shield these fragile lives from the danger that prowled just beyond the cabin's fragile walls. Every instinct screamed caution. Every memory of past battles and lonely nights begged him to stay silent, to remain alone. But something unspoken in the little girl's gaze, raw and desperate, stirred a warmth he had long forgotten, a responsibility heavier than any weapon he had ever carried. The candle flickered violently, casting dancing shadows over their faces, the little girl's eyes wide pools of fear, her sister trembling beside her, silent except for the occasional whimper, and each sound from outside. A distant snap of a branch, a low, uncertain howl, the shuffle of feet across frost-bitten ground, pressed closer, pressing the tension like a knife against the cowboy's ribs. His hand hovered near the old rifle in the corner, yet he did not reach for it, knowing that force alone could not protect them. What they needed was courage and decisiveness, and that burden fell squarely on his shoulders. The girl's voice cracked again, louder this time. "I'm scared. I don't want to be alone, please." And it was as if the cabin itself held its breath, the shadows leaning closer, the storm outside matching the turmoil inside. And the cowboy's chest tightened as he felt the weight of the decision crushing him, each heartbeat echoing in the silent, oppressive space between them. He shifted slightly, his boots creaking against the worn floorboards, eyes scanning every corner for movement, the candlelight reflecting off his hardened but conflicted features, revealing the battle waging silently within, a mixture of fear, duty, and an unspoken empathy that threatened to overwhelm the solitude he had built over years. He could sense the girl's hope dangling on the edge of desperation, fragile as the thin glass of the window rattling beside them, and he knew that any hesitation could cost them everything. The storm intensified, rain pelting the roof with relentless rhythm, thunder rolling like the growl of some unseen beast, and with each moment, the little girl's pleading voice pierced the walls of his self-protection, echoing in his chest as if her fear had become his own. The distance between the shadows and their fragile warmth closed with every shifting sound outside, the threat unrelenting, unseen, pressing into the cabin's weak structure and the cowboy's fingers flexed, tightening around the edge of the table as he weighed instinct against compassion, danger against morality. And in that suspended moment, the audience could feel the suffocating tension, the weight of responsibility, the electric pulse of uncertainty, the undeniable truth that in the storm outside and the fear within, one decision would define them all, and the suspense was unbearable, yet impossibly compelling, pulling hearts forward, whispering that what came next would either be salvation or devastation. And the cowboy, with a slow exhale, finally met the little girl's gaze, eyes softening just enough to hint that he was no longer just a man alone, but someone about to act, someone ready to face the darkness for the sake of those too small to defend themselves. And the audience held their breath, knowing the moment before courage became action was the most fragile, most precious heartbeat of all. The cowboy drew a slow, deliberate breath, feeling the weight of the storm and the little girl's trembling hands pressing against his coat. And in that moment, something shifted inside him, a hardness melting into quiet resolve as his eyes softened, revealing a depth of care he had long kept buried. And without a word, he stepped forward, each movement measured, almost painfully cautious, but full of intent. The shadows of the cabin seeming to recede slightly, as if recognizing the courage unfolding within, and the little girl, sensing the change, clung to him with a desperate relief that made his chest tighten, her small arms wrapping around his waist, her head resting against his chest. The storm outside fading into background noise as the warmth of trust and safety began to fill the room. And he felt an unfamiliar protective instinct surge, the kind that demanded action, that refused to allow harm to touch those fragile beings standing before him. And his hand moved almost unconsciously to rest gently on her back, a subtle yet powerful gesture that spoke louder than words, silent communication that she was no longer alone, that someone would fight for her even in the darkest night. And as he glanced toward the sister huddled near the corner, wide-eyed and trembling, he gave a small, controlled nod, a quiet signal that it was safe to follow, that she too could step forward into the fragile bubble of protection forming around them. And the tension that had gripped the room for what felt like an eternity slowly began to dissolve into a fragile hope, a promise that the nightmare outside would not claim them, at least not tonight. And the cabin itself seemed to breathe, the flickering candlelight reflecting off his softened features, highlighting the silent bond now weaving between him and the children, a bond formed not from words but from presence, touch, and the unspoken assurance of safety. And the little girl's eyes shone with a mixture of awe and trust, her tiny hand gripping his with renewed confidence as she peered at him as if seeing a hero where she had only seen strangers before. And he, feeling the weight of that trust, straightened his shoulders, not in pride, but in acceptance of the responsibility, the kind that changes a person in ways no battle or hardship ever could. While the sister's hesitant steps toward him were slow but steady, her fear easing under the invisible shield of his attention, and each creak of the floorboards, each gust of wind against the cabin walls, now seemed less threatening, tempered by the undeniable presence of protection and compassion, and the audience could feel the emotional pulse, the swelling of hope, the powerful silent communication that courage is not loud, that love does not always announce itself, that the strongest gestures are often the quietest. And in that suspended, electric moment, the cowboy, the little girl, and her sister became a fragile but unbreakable unit, the storm outside and the fear within, gradually transforming into an emotional crescendo of relief and anticipation, leaving the audience breathless yet deeply invested in what would come next, their hearts tethered to the silent, tender, heroic acts that promised safety and a future where hope had found its first, cautious home. The wind howled louder now, rattling the cabin with a violence that made the walls shiver, and through the rain-streaked windows, shadowy figures moved just beyond sight, their presence menacing and deliberate, each crack of a branch or distant shuffle sending icy tremors through the little girl's body as she clung to the cowboy, her tiny hands gripping his coat with a desperate need for protection. And he felt the weight of the moment press down on him, the seconds stretching impossibly long as instinct and courage collided, and without hesitation, he stepped fully into the space between them and the unknown threat. positioning himself as a living barrier, eyes scanning the darkness for any sign of danger, muscles coiled, senses alert, heart pounding not just from fear, but from the responsibility now fully claimed, and a sudden noise, a low growl, a step too close, made him pivot sharply, hand brushing the hilt of his revolver though his voice remained calm and steady, commanding in its quiet authority, "Stay behind me." Words so simple yet charged with unspoken promise, and the children obeyed. Their trust absolute, and the shadows outside shifted, movement hinting at the presence of someone or something waiting, testing, watching. But the cowboy's gaze never wavered, and he stepped forward, his boots crunching on the frost-covered ground just inside the doorway, his posture unyielding, a living shield, while the little girl's breath came in shallow, rapid bursts. Yet the fear in her eyes slowly mingled with awe as she realized he would not falter, that his courage would carry them through. And he extended a hand toward the sister, a silent invitation that she, too, was protected. And in that single act, the tension cracked, hope piercing through the darkness, the storm outside echoing the intensity of the moment. Yet inside the cabin, a fragile calm began to form, the threat outside tangible but unable to breach the bubble of protection. And every creak of the cabin floor, every gust of wind, every shadow in the corners served only to highlight his decisiveness, his unwavering focus on safeguarding them at any cost. And then, in a fluid, instinctive motion, he moved to block the doorway fully, body angled to shield the children, eyes sharp, voice absent but authority unmistakable, and the audience could feel their own pulse quicken, tension and exhilaration merging as the cowboy's selflessness became undeniable, the emotional climax swelling as he stood firm, silent but heroic, while the little girl and her sister sensed the danger but no longer felt powerless, the unspoken bond between them and their protector deepening with every heartbeat. And the night itself seemed to hold its breath as the threat outside hovered at the edge of perception. And in that moment, every fear, every whisper of despair, every shiver of uncertainty transformed into relief mixed with awe, for the audience understood without words that courage, sacrifice, and protection had found their perfect embodiment in a man willing to risk everything for those who could not defend themselves. And the scene held them suspended in that cinematic heartbeat, riding the storm of suspense and emotion to its most electrifying, yet profoundly human, peak. The storm outside finally began to lose its fury, rain tapping softer against the wooden roof and windows, and inside the cabin, a fragile calm settled like a warm blanket over the little girl and her sister, their small bodies pressed close together as they huddled against the cowboy, who remained vigilant for a heartbeat longer, eyes scanning every shadow before finally allowing himself to relax slightly, and the little girl's arms wrapped tightly around his waist, squeezing as if holding on to the very courage that had just protected them, her face buried against his chest, tears of fear slowly transforming into tears of relief, while he lowered his hand gently to rest on her back, his thumb brushing soothing circles across her trembling shoulders, silent words of comfort flowing through touch alone. And then, with a voice calm yet full of quiet authority, he finally spoke. "You're safe now. No one can hurt you here." Words simple but carrying the weight of protection and reassurance, the kind that fills an empty room with hope, and the sister's trembling eased as she listened, realizing that the man who had seemed so distant and unapproachable was now their guardian, their anchor in the chaos, their safe harbor in a night that had threatened to swallow them whole. And the candlelight flickered warmly, casting gentle shadows across their faces as if the cabin itself had exhaled, releasing the tension that had gripped every corner, every wall, every fragile heartbeat. And the storm's retreat became symbolic, each weakening gust and softening roll of thunder, a reflection of the fear that had clung to them now finally dissipating, replaced by the warmth of trust and security. And the cowboy's eyes softened even further, observing the little faces peeking up at him, realizing the depth of their reliance on him. And he allowed a small, almost imperceptible smile, not of pride but of relief, relief that he had met the moment with courage, that he had transformed a night of terror into one of survival and care. And the children, sensing the shift, relaxed fully, their bodies melting into the safety he provided. their breaths slowing, fear replaced by quiet wonder, and outside, the clouds parted slightly, the moonlight spilling through the window to illuminate the cabin, bathing the scene in soft silver light, and the cowboy moved to sit near them, arms gently encircling both girls as they leaned against him, a trio bound by fear, courage, and newfound hope. While the storm now reduced to distant whispers mirrored the transformation within them. The end of danger, the arrival of calm, and the audience could feel the emotional release, the tension easing, the warmth spreading as the hero's actions, silent determination, and protective presence delivered a payoff that resonated deeply, leaving hearts full and minds relieved, the suspense replaced with satisfaction, the fear replaced with a tangible sense of care. And the scene lingered as a quiet testament to the power of courage, empathy, and trust as the cowboy, little girl, and her sisters sat together in the gentle glow of safety. The room filled with unspoken gratitude and the promise that no matter how fierce the storms outside, they would always have a refuge in each other. A moment that left the audience breathless yet comforted, a perfect cinematic closure to a night of fear turned into hope. The cabin was finally quiet, the storm a fading memory as moonlight spilled gently through the cracks, illuminating the cowboy, the little girl, and her sister pressed close. Together, hearts slowly returning to normal. And in that stillness, a profound bond had formed, unspoken but undeniable, as the little girl rested her head against his chest once more, eyes closed in trust, and the sister's small hand found his, gripping softly, a silent thank you, and the cowboy's gaze softened, filled with a tenderness he had never known he possessed, the weight of the night lifting as he whispered gently, "We're safe now, together," words carrying courage, reassurance, and love. And in that moment, fear had no place, only warmth, hope, and a sense of home created not by walls but by protection and kindness. And as they sat together in that fragile peace, the audience felt their own hearts swell, knowing sometimes the greatest strength is gentle, and sometimes the strongest home is found in unexpected hearts, a moment that lingered in memory, powerful, emotional, and unforgettable.